Big changes coming to the sport. That's where I want to start tonight's show. Big changes coming to college football. You already know that changes are coming in the way of an expanded college football playoff. We don't need to talk about that. You know that NIL seems to always be changing, right? Don't need to talk about it. You know that conferences are realigning right under our nose. Don't need to talk about it. Well, what other kind of changes could there be on the horizon? I think some good changes are coming. One of you asked me yesterday, actually in person. I saw one of you at the gym, and one of you asked me, what kind of changes do you think are around the corner in college football that maybe aren't on the radar? A lot of times, these are the kind of questions I'll get. What's happening that I don't know about? Well, there are a few things happening, and I found it necessary to lead the show with it tonight. So I want you to think about this right now. Last December, you probably don't remember it, but we did a segment on the show about the big money shift in college football. And it was a lot of what was happening on the surface and how it impacted things beneath the surface. And I told you at the time some things were coming, and it wasn't necessarily going to be front page news, but it was going to impact everything on the front page. So at the time, we were hearing a lot about NIL, and we were hearing a lot about how, just to give you an example, programs were realizing we're not going to have the bottomless amount of money that we used to have to build immaculate facilities. Also, they were starting to realize maybe these palatial facilities aren't necessarily what's going to win a recruiting battle down the road. Because if you can just hand money to a kid, maybe we don't need to take all this money and put it in assets like a $500 trillion weight room or a sauna that also, has confetti fall from the roof and it can make it fake snow in there. Maybe that's not necessary to win a recruiting battle like it used to be, but they were starting to realize, and they still are, in athletic departments around the country, some of the stuff we used to be able to do, some of the stuff we used to be able to pull off, I should say, we're not going to be able to pull off anymore. In some cases, maybe we don't need to. But anyway, so we talked about that in December. Well, there's another thing I said in December, and I said I thought there was a Moneyball era coming in college football. I just left it at that. At the time, I had had some initial conversations with some power players behind the scenes in college football that led me to believe maybe that's the next chapter. It's going to be the next book. Not the next chapter in college football. It's going to be the next book. So the whole money shift thing, everyone says college football is all about money. Cool. What do you mean? Be specific. Well, when I talk about the money shift in college football as it relates to NIL, I'm not even talking about players getting money. Sure, that's what NIL means, name, image, and likeness. But for every action, there is an equal and, in this case, opposite reaction. And that means for every dollar that is going to your tailback or your wide receiver, that's $1 less because it's coming from a third party, aka a booster's pocket in most cases, that's not going where it used to go. A money shift. Money's not drying up. There's never been more money in this sport than there is now. Just a shift in the money. So I talked to you in December about this Moneyball theory of mine. Moneyball, for those unfamiliar, is basically the Oakland A's modus operandi under Billy Beane for putting together a team with a fraction of the payroll that the New York Yankees had. It's a great movie. I think it's one of the better baseball movies ever made. And it is based on a true story. Brad Pitt didn't actually run the A's, Jesse, no. So Brad Pitt was not actually the general manager of the Oakland A's per se. Maybe if he was, they wouldn't be moving to Las Vegas, but that's another show for another day. But it's a great example of what can happen if you value the right things, what you can accomplish when the right things are valued in relation to being at a disadvantage when it comes to the things that people think are valuable. So in baseball, you got way less money than the other team, but you can still put up a record that roughly matches them. How do you do it? Data and analytics, just simple math, understanding what to value. How's that work in college football? There's a Moneyball era coming in college football. It's not the next chapter, which I previously thought. I think it's the whole next book. The power for a long time in this sport when it comes to hiring coaches has simply been in the hands of who has the most powerful clientele list. Jimmy Sexton, for example, is a rock star in college football and has been for a long time because he is the representative of almost every major head coach in college football, certainly in the South. He represents Smart, he represents Saban, he represents a lot of the big-time coaches, not just in the SEC. And Jimmy Sexton's not going anywhere. I'm not saying the major agent is going anywhere necessarily. However, I think there is coming very soon a power dynamic shift. Today in college football, the power is in which agent has the most powerful clients. Tomorrow, The power is going to be in the hands of who can assign proper value to a coach, who can define the true value of a coach. It's always been there. The math has always been there. The things that actually win have always been there. The factors and criteria, when calibrated properly, they've always been there. It's just no one's quite publicly cornered the market. There are some really sharp folks behind the scenes, but no one has really become the face of this. I've had a lot of conversations about this lately. I think that's going to change, and I think it's going to change pretty soon. And what that means for you as a fan is maybe you see a few less instances of you hiring a guy or an entire staff and then having to hit the dump button on them 3 years later and pay massive buyout money. Now, it's never really impacted you because that money was never yours, and it's never really impacted, in some cases, your athletic director or the administration because it wasn't their money either. But the money that used to go to a buyout pool is now being shifted over to those other three letters, that NIL pool. And so not only may you not have the money to build those huge facilities anymore, you may not just know you've got that buyout money in your back pocket either. It's become popular in college football over the last decade and a half to just say, oh, screw it. If it doesn't work out, 70 mil, 80 mil, we'll pay it. Well, who in the world's we? In most cases, it's not you. That's why it's so easy to talk about that money. But imagine being an athletic director and all of a sudden being told, hey, the money that you once upon a time thought was going to be there, it's not there anymore. You better make these hires work. Well, all of a sudden, it becomes a lot more fine game than just, my buddy down in Ozark, Alabama, he likes this defensive line coach, and he chips in 1.2 per year to the athletic fund. So let's give that D-line coach a chance. I'm not saying this is how sloppy all coaching searches happen, but there are many voices in the room of coaching searches that have no business being in the room of coaching searches. I think there is going to be a much, much finer filter put on coaching searches in the future, in the very near future. And the Moneyball approach, understanding what to value and how much to value it, is going to walk in the room pretty quickly here. Someone's going to corner the market on it. Someone's going to become rich because of it. And someone's going to change the game in the process. Number two, and it all has to do with the money shift, and this is really what's going to catch a lot of your ears and eyes, is we are rapidly approaching an entirely new governance structure in college football. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but the NCAA doesn't seem to be on the most sturdy of grounds, does it? No, because it's not. Now, I'm not saying next week or 2 weeks from now, but eventually those four letters will largely be a thing of the past too, as it relates to what you view as the overall governing body of this sport. I have told you I don't think this is as simple as 1, 2, 3 or ABC because it costs money to run college football, and it specifically costs money to cover the liability of running college football. That's what stood in the way of this so far. Believe me, member institutions do not look at the NCAA as this moral beacon under which or without which they wouldn't know where to go. They look at the NCAA and say, it's a good thing we got that shield over us so that when someone files a lawsuit because of career-ending or debilitating injury, CTE is an entire problem. When someone files those lawsuits, it's not us at the University of Maryland that has to cover it. The NCAA is the one that goes to fight that battle in court. No one's looking forward to that. But the positives probably outweigh the negatives down the road because the money is so big, the money shift is so big, that there's also coming a day, very soon, I think, where you have a new governance structure in college football. And you know why that's important to me? It's important to me because I can't wait until the last day that I ever have to hear about college football teams vacating wins as a punitive measure from the NCAA. This has always been the stupidest thing on the face of the earth. For you to be punished for something normally you did like a decade ago because they work at a glacial pace at the NCAA, when they finally do nail you, quote unquote, what's one of the first things they want to do? They want to take things away that we already know happened because we all watched it happen. LSU recently has to vacate wins from the Les Miles era. Did you wake up the next morning and look at the world and see it any differently? No, because nothing changed, because that's foolishness. It's nonsense. And the same thing goes with taking people's Heismans. I watched Reggie Bush. I know he was the best player in the country that year. And therefore, when I picture Reggie Bush's mantle, there's a Heisman Trophy on it. I could not care less what the NCAA or any other governing body has come in and retroactively said does or doesn't belong there, because it's not their sport, really. It's ours to define, a lot more than theirs. Anyway, that kind of stuff still happens, unfortunately. In the future, when you have a new governance structure that's probably run a lot more by the leagues and by the conferences themselves than, some entity like the NCAA, it will be about money. When you get punished because you violate rules that under that governance structure those conferences have agreed to abide by, you're getting hit in the wallet. Kids aren't going to get hit because you lack scholarships. Players from 10 years ago aren't going to all of a sudden be told that game you won didn't really happen. Players who, won the Remington Trophy aren't all of a sudden going to have it plucked out of their apartment in the middle of the night, because that doesn't mean anything. And that doesn't really impact anyone that needs to be impacted. Losing money is what impacts you. Oh my goodness, there's Floyd of Rosedale. So we just have a rule on the show. I have to salute whenever Floyd of Rosedale is on the screen, because it's kind of sort of the greatest trophy in sports. I hate to be the bearer of bad news to you guys. Stanley Cup's wonderful. I mean, the Lombardi Trophy is beautiful, but something special about that little pig. Just something special that tugs at the heartstrings. So, yeah, when you have a new governance structure, that governance structure is not going to include vacating wins. It's not going to include taking trophies away from anyone, and it shouldn't. So, two things that I want you to watch. It's not going to be a snap of the fingers, but two things I want you to watch. And Jesse, we're bookmarking this segment because both of these things are going to happen. I will guarantee it. Number one, the way that coaches are hired, the process in which they're hired, and the way you assign value to a coach as you hire him is about to have a radical alteration. Now, I'm talking publicly about this. Smart thinking athletic directors have been doing this and have known who to consult with for quite a while. That is not an exhaustive list, because not all of them understand how to go about their business. In the future, it'll be a prerequisite. Like, if you don't understand who to go to and how to go about your business, you won't even get the job. And number two, new governance is coming. I don't know if it's going to be league by league. I don't know if it's going to be leagues entering into a collective governance structure, but it's coming. And both of these things will be for the better, because you don't have to watch your program pay astronomical buyouts because they hired the wrong guys that had no business being hired 12, 24, 36, 48 months ago. And you don't have to be told that a game you went to a dozen years ago all of a sudden doesn't count. And those, by my estimation, are both really, really good changes.